Tonight is the 30th of August, 2011, and this is the fourth night. We are speaking on the Dhammapada. We come to chapter 15, Sukha Vaga, happiness chapter, verse 197. Happy indeed we live, friendly amidst the hostile. Amidst hostile people we dwell free from hatred. 198. Happy indeed we live, unafflicted amidst those afflicted. Amidst afflicted people we dwell free from affliction. 199. Happy indeed we live, free from avarice amidst the avaricious. Amidst avaricious people we dwell free from avarice. Verse 200. Happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. We shall be feeders on joy, like the radiant gods. So, if we are among hostile people, when people are hostile, they are hostile towards others, and the vipaka comes back to them. People are also hostile to them, so they have to suffer. But if we are not hostile, then we dwell free from hostility or hatred, then we are happy. Similarly, those who are afflicted by craving, so they are not happy, always being unsatisfied. But contentment is something independent of what we have outside. Contentment is a state of mind we have to cultivate. If we cultivate contentment, then even though people see that we have very few things, relatively poor, but we feel we have enough. They have found out from investigation that the happiest people in the world are not the richest. Many of the happiest people in the world are actually poor people. Because they learn to be contented, they don't expect too much. And if people are avaricious, greedy, they also feel always discontent, unsatisfied. And this last one, verse 200, there is a sutta where the Buddha and his disciples, they went on Pindapata, arms round. And then this Mara possessed the lay people and induced the lay people not to give any food to the monks. So they came back empty-handed. Even though they came back empty-handed, the Buddha said, never mind, we shall be feeders of joy, feeders of joy, like the radiant gods. These radiant gods are in the Abhasara heaven, is in the second jhana heaven, and there their state of mind gives them a lot of joy, so that every day they are exclaiming, oh happiness, like blissed out, more happy than on ecstasy pill, and for millions and millions of years. So the Buddha and his disciples, especially the Arahants, they are able to attain these jhana states. So they feel so happy in these states of jhana, they don't need to eat to feed their physical body. 201. Victory begets enmity. The defeated dwell in pain. Happily the peaceful live, discarding both victory and defeat. In this world, people always like to fight and win, even like games. You all know, recently there was a friendly basketball game in China, ended up fighting, yes or not? So, as this verse says, victory begets enmity and the defeated dwell in pain. So if we don't fight with other people, we're not greedy for victory, then we don't challenge people. 202. There is no fire like lust, no crime like hatred. There is no ill like the aggregates, no bliss higher than the peace of Nibbana. So when there is lust, it's like a fire that consumes us. And we don't know what we are doing. Even when somebody falls in love, they say smoke gets in your eyes. And this hatred, when there's a lot of hatred, we dare to do a lot of things because of hatred. Sometimes people kill. There's no ill, no suffering like the aggregates. These aggregates are the 5 aggregates. Body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, which is basically body and mind. It gives us a lot of suffering. And no bliss higher than the peace of Nibbana. The Buddha says, Nibbana paramang sukhang. A lot of people don't understand, how can Nibbana be so blissful? Because Nibbana is a state where, or Parinibbana is a state where the 6 consciousness ceases. When the 6 consciousness ceases, there is no feeling. Yet the Buddha says it is the highest bliss. You can find this similarly in our sleep. When we go to sleep, there are 2 types of sleep. One is the dreaming state. The other one is a very deep sleep where there is no dreams. So in the dreaming state, it's not so blissful because in our dreams we get excited, sometimes we get fear, we think somebody is going to harm us. But in the deep sleep state, you have no, it's so deep that it's as though you have no awareness. So you don't even have awareness of yourself. Because there is no self in that deep sleep state. That's why it's so blissful. Whenever there's a self, we feel the need to protect the self. From the moment we are born until we die, we are struggling to protect this self, providing it with food, with shelter, free from harm and all that. So when there's no self in the deep sleep state, we are totally at ease. No need to protect ourselves. So that's why it's so blissful. So Nibbana is also like that. There's totally no self. 203. Hunger is the worst disease. Sankhara, volition, is the worst suffering. Knowing this as it really is, the wise realize Nibbana, the highest bliss. All beings have to eat. So when we are hungry, we feel so much suffering. And then volition is the worst suffering. What is this volition? Volition is exercising our will. You exercise your will when you want something, when you desire something. So moved by wants, by desires, by craving, we exercise volition. And when we exercise volition, the consequence leads to suffering. If you have nothing you desire, then there is no suffering. But because there is desire, so there is volition, and there is suffering. 204. Health is the highest gain, contentment the greatest wealth. Trustworthy person is the best kinsman, Nibbana the highest bliss. This health is not the body health, it's more of the mental health. It's the highest gain. Contentment is the greatest wealth. If you are contented, you are like the richest man in the world. You don't need anything more. But if you are not contented, you might be a billionaire. A lot of billionaires in the world, they are not contented. They strive to be the top dog, the richest man in the world. So because they are always struggling, they are not contented. So they are not wealthy. But if you are contented, you are the wealthiest person in the world. You don't need anything anymore. The best kinsman is a trustworthy person. And Nibbana is the greatest bliss. 205. Having severed the taste of solitude and of peace, pain-free and stainless he becomes, drinking deep the taste of the bliss of the Dhamma. This taste of solitude, if you are not used to it, and if you are restless, you find solitude so unpleasant. But if you are the type of monk who likes to meditate and attain one-pointedness of mind, then you love solitude. and you drink the deep taste of Dhamma. 206. Good it is to see the noble ones, the Aryans. To live with them is ever blissful. One will always be happy by not encountering fools. 207. Indeed, one who moves in the company of fools grieves for a long time. Association with fools is ever painful, like partnership with an enemy. But happy is the association with the wise, like meeting one's own relatives. 208. Therefore, follow the noble one, the Arya, who is steadfast, wise, learned, dutiful, and devout. One should follow only such a person who is truly good and discerning, even as the moon follows the path of the stars. So it's good to associate with noble ones, Aryans, because Aryans, their conduct is comforting. If you live with a Arya, he's not so greedy like a lot of worldly people. He doesn't have anger like worldly people. So it's pleasant company. But if you have to live with a fool, then because of his greed, hatred and delusion, it causes pain to himself and causes pain and suffering to all around him. So it is wise to follow an Arya, person who knows the Dhamma, and then you can also learn the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. Chapter 16, Piya Vaga. Piya is affection. 209, giving himself to things to be shunned and not exerting himself where exertion is needed. A seeker after pleasures forsakes his own true welfare and will come to envy those intent upon their welfare. So a fool is one who unwholesome things he wants, and then not exerting himself where he should make effort, not making effort where he should make effort, wholesome actions. So if a person keeps seeking worldly pleasures, in the end he will envy those who practice the holy path, because those who practice the holy path will go to a good place, whereas those who seek after worldly pleasures will go to woeful plains of rebirth. 210. Seek no intimacy with the beloved, and also not with the unloved. For not to see the beloved and to see the unloved are both painful. 211. Therefore, hold nothing dear, for separation from the dear is painful. There are no bonds for those who have nothing beloved or unloved. These worldly people don't like to hear this. Seek no intimacy with the beloved. That means cut off this intimacy with those that you love, because they are the source of suffering later on. Now they are the source of happiness, but one day they will be the source of your suffering, because life is impermanent. Either they separate from you or you separate from them. So also is suffering to be with those that you don't love, your enemies also give you suffering. So those you love and those that you don't love, both of them give you pain. So that's why earlier we read about the Buddha encouraging monks to live alone, wander alone like the rhinoceros. Remember the Sutta Nipata. There are no bonds for those who have nothing beloved or unloved. So whether we like it or not, we have to let go, because in a few more years we will have to let go entirely, whether you like it or not. 212. From endearment springs grief, from endearment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from endearment, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 213. From affection springs grief, from affection springs fear. For one who is wholly free from affection, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 214. From enjoyment springs grief, From enjoyment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from enjoyment, there is no grief. Whence then fear? From lust springs grief. From lust springs fear. For one who is wholly free from lust, there is no grief. Whence then fear? 216. From craving springs grief. From craving springs fear. For one who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief. Whence then fear? So this 212, those that are dear to you, grief arises when you have to separate from them. So because one day you fear separation from them, so you have fear that you will lose them. So when you really lose them, then you have grief. Even before losing them, you already have fear. So if there is nothing you hold dear, then there is no grief. What more to talk about fear? So in the same way, affection is the same. From enjoyment, those things that you enjoy, if you don't have them, then you have grief. And then you have fear because you are afraid you may lose it. Similarly, from lust, if you lust for someone, or you lust for your bottle of Scotch whiskey or what, then when you don't have it, you have grief. And similarly for craving. 217. People hold dear one who embodies virtue and insight, who is principled, has realized the truth, and who himself does what he ought to be doing. So a person who practices virtue and has insight or wisdom, who has principles and understands the truth of the Dhamma, then people value, people are inspired by such a person. 218. One who is intent upon the ineffable, that means Nibbana, and dwells with mind inspired by wisdom. Such a person, no more bound by sense pleasures, is called one bound upstream. If a person practices the Dhamma and then he gives up sensual pleasures, and such a one is bound for Nibbana, has entered the stream that will bring him to Nibbana. 219. When after a long absence, a man safely returns home from afar, his relatives, friends and well-wishers welcome him home on arrival. 220. As relatives welcome a dear one on arrival, even so his own good deeds will welcome the doer of good who has gone from this world to the next. So when we do wholesome actions, skillful actions, then after we pass away, this karma will welcome us in the next rebirth. For example, in heaven. Chapter 17, Koda Vaga, on anger. 221. One should give up anger, renounce pride, and overcome all fetters. Suffering never befalls him who clings not to mentality and materiality and is detached. This anger has very much to do with pride. When you have pride that you are somebody, and when somebody doesn't give you enough respect by maybe saying some words that you don't like to hear, then you get angry. And so if you get angry then you do angry actions, then you will suffer for it. But you don't cling to mentality and materiality. This mentality and materiality means everything in the world, the mental part and the material part of the world. So if you don't cling to anything in the world and you are detached, then you have no reason to be angry. If you are attached to your ego, then it's easy to get angry. 222. One who checks rising anger, as a charioteer checks a rolling chariot. Him I call a true charioteer. Others only hold the reins. Others only hold the reins. Reminds me of those who think mindfulness is enough. A lot of us, we are mindful, but we have no control. Even the person who commits adultery, as if he's not mindful that it is wrong. He knows it's wrong, but cannot tahan. So, as they say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So it's not enough just to be mindful, just to know. You have to hold the reins, like here. Those arahants, even those the Buddha's disciples who have strong samadhi due to cultivating jhana, the Buddha says, when they perceive something that is loathsome, if they want to, they can perceive it as attractive. And if they want to, they can perceive it as loathsome. And similarly, anything that is attractive, if the mind is strong enough, they can perceive it as attractive, or they can even perceive it as loathsome. This is holding the reins. This is not holding the reins. This is driving the chariot. But if you are just mindful, you are just holding the reins, and the chariot is going all over the place. You have no control at all. So in the same way, if you are not in control, you cannot check your anger. You only know that you're angry, and your anger brings you to do unwholesome actions. And you know, and yet you cannot control yourself. So that's why it's important to have samadhi, to have a strong mind, so that you are the master of your mind. You're the master of your emotions, not the emotions, the master of you. 223. Overcome the angry by non-anger. Overcome the wicked by goodness. Overcome the miser by generosity. Overcome the liar by truth. So just as you cannot put out a flame with another flame, you have to put out a flame, a fire with water, the opposite. So in the same way, when you are in an angry situation, you have to use non-anger. When people are wicked to you, you have to be good to them. When people are miserly to you, you have to be generous. And you overcome lies by truth. 224. Speak the truth. Do not give way to anger. Give of your little to him that asks of you. By these three things, one may go to the realm of gods. So, here is telling us always speak the truth. Secondly, don't get angry. Thirdly, practice generosity. Earlier, we heard one sutta where the Buddha says, if only people knew the result of giving, as I do, the Buddha said, they would not be stingy. They would not even eat the last bit of food they have without sharing with others. But it's because people don't know the result of giving. Therefore, they are stingy. So, that's why here it says, give of your little to him that asks of you. Even if you have little, people ask, also you should share. So if you do these three things, you have a very good chance of going to heaven. Those things that are hard to do, you can do, that is meritorious. Those things that are easy to do, is not meritorious. 225. Those sages who are inoffensive and ever restrained in body go to the deathless state, where they grieve no more. So those who practice the Dhamma, they do not offend people, and they are restrained in their conduct. So they go to the deathless state, attain liberation. 226. Those who are ever vigilant, who discipline themselves day and night, ever intent upon Nibbana, their asavas fade away. These asavas, you can translate it as uncontrolled mental outflows. Uncontrolled mental outflows. Your defilements are also uncontrolled mental outflows. Your consciousness is also uncontrolled mental outflows. So those who practice the path to Nibbana, they discipline themselves day and night. In other words, they don't sleep like ordinary people sleep. 227. O Atula, indeed this is an old pattern, not one only of today. They blame one who remains silent. They blame one who speaks much. They blame one who speaks in moderation. There is none in this world who is not blamed. 228. There never was, there never will be, nor is there now, a person who is wholly blamed or wholly praised. The world is such, when you keep quiet, also people will criticize you. You talk too much, also people will criticize you. You speak in moderation, also you are not free from criticism. So life is like that. So don't be moved by what people say. The Buddha says, if foolish people pass comments, you let it go in one ear and go out the other. What's the point of getting annoyed? If you get annoyed, you get angry, then you are keeping his words in your brain, in your mind. But these rubbish words, why do you want to keep in your mind? Just throw it out. But if a wise man says something to you, then you retain it. Think about it. So he's a foolish man. Don't just ignore those silly comments that silly people make. 229 to 230. But as to the person whom the wise praise, after observing him day after day, one of flawless character, wise, and endowed with knowledge and virtue, who can blame such a one as worthy as a coin of refined gold? Even the gods praise him. By Brahma too is he praised. So if a person is of flawless character, endowed with knowledge and virtuous conduct, even the gods will praise such a person. From the suttas we find that these devas and devis, they seem to be quite aware of what is happening in the world. 231. One should guard oneself against irritability in bodily action. One should be controlled in deed. Having abandoned bodily misconduct, one should practice good conduct in deed. 232. One should guard oneself against irritability in speech. One should be controlled in speech. Having abandoned verbal misconduct, one should practice good conduct in speech. 233. One should guard oneself against irritability in thought. One should be controlled in thought. Having abandoned mental misconduct, one should practice good conduct in thought. 234. The wise are controlled in bodily deeds, controlled in speech, and controlled in thought. They are truly well controlled. So how to control yourself? It's very important to have some samadhi. If you don't have samadhi, then your emotions easily move you. But the Buddha says, if you have some samadhi, then you are as solid as a rock. When a big wind blows, a big storm blows, it can never shake the rock. So in the same way, if your mind is strong, then we are not moved by emotions, we are not irritable. A lot of people are easily irritated. So if you are easily irritated, then your emotions are not under control. Then you can act wrongly to your body, to your speech, and to your mind. So not to be irritated so easily, firstly we have to understand the Dhamma. Secondly, we have to cultivate some samadhi so that our mind is more tranquil. When our mind is tranquil, it's not easily shaken.